This is a Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. This is Coach Kris, and I'm here to give you the edge to be 1% better every day. From a star-studded cast right now, we've got Dr. Grove Higgins in the house. We've got Morgan Flaherty, Wes Barnett, a two-time All-American, and Nathan Cragg. Thanks for all coming in. Go ahead. We'll start over with my buddy, Dr. Grove. Go ahead and give us a little bio of yourself, what you've been doing.
Yep, I'm Dr. Grove Higgins. I'm a chiropractor and a rehabilitationist here in Monument, Colorado. And I've been on the show before, so you can look me up there.
Absolutely. Morgan.
Hi, my name is Morgan Flaherty. I'm a Team USA Greco-Roman wrestler, strength and conditioning coach, and physiologist.
Excellent. Mr. Wes Barnett.
Wes Barnett, 1992-1996 Olympian in the sport of weightlifting. I had the fortunate pleasure of living at the Olympic Training Center for about 10 years. After that career, I went and worked for the Olympic Committee for about 15 years after that, and currently I work for a nutritional supplement company, Thorne Research.
Yeah, so Nathan Cragg, I am currently a warrant officer with the Army National Guard here in Colorado, and I also run an online training team for primarily military and law enforcement.
Awesome. So you heard that, ladies and gentlemen. We got a star-studded cast here. One even has his own Wikipedia page. Do you have your own Wikipedia page too, Morgan? Or
Could be.
could be out there somewhere.
I don't know about it if it's out there.
Right
It's
on.
false information if it is. Maybe.
False information. So the first question that we're going to get into is, what does fitness mean to each of you folks?
Well, don't start with me. I get to fix it when it fails.
Right?
Shoot. Well, I mean, I always appreciated the original definition of fitness in the way that Darwin put it out there. And this is just because it's nice to have an anchor for where a word kind of started, and then kind of go from there and let it evolve naturally. So I always liked how Darwin put it in perspective that like fitness is a species capable, that is suitable for its environment, and how it evolves with respect to that environment. And I like how nowadays you can see how the paradigm of different sports and different different groups of people are navigating in different areas and trying to maximize their potential within certain groups. And you can see how these people are now specifying their training in order to maximize the result within certain things. So I think that kind of fits along with Darwin's kind of idea of fitness, in that you are evolving with your desire and you're adapting to that specific lane that you're in.
With your environment.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Which, in the metaphor of the environment for us, is our training and the demands of sport or military and law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. Wes.
Or everyday life, really. It's my definition is right along those same lines, but it's more you're able to do whatever it is that you're doing in a manner that you're not injuring yourself while you're doing it. So whether you are a mom being able to put your kids in a car seat without wrenching your back, there's a certain level of fitness that that's required for that. So I think it's individual for each person, and depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it, it's going to look different from everybody. But if you can do it in a way that is efficient and you're not hurting yourself, that to me is definition of fitness.
And Nathan.
For me, I think it's just preparation of whatever your end outcome is going to be. So it can even delve into like financial fitness or something that's more broad. So
I like it.
So to me, it's just the overall preparation.
Right. So it's the overall preparation, building habits, so that way you can do whatever your environment is demanding of you, whether that's get your kids, right? Whether that's be an All-American wrestler or a weightlifter, whatever it is that you're doing out there. The definition of fitness is basically to be able to do what you're doing to the best of your ability. Correct?
Yep. And if it's done well, it keeps you immune from the repetitive effects of the things that you do. right? And that doesn't mean that you get to walk away from, weightlifting without some damage or wrestling or whatnot. We still have to keep up with those things, but the better the level of fitness matches the end goal, the desired outcome that you want from your body, your mind, your finances, and things like that, you walk away with less damage, and so then you spend less time remediating those defects, and you get to move forward and continue to move forward in your sport or in your goals in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why when people come to me, I like to call everybody an athlete. They don't think of it that way, right? Because they're like, well, I'm not out there, shooting hoops or wrestling. I'm like, no, but you got to live life. And you have to use your body to live life, right? So the better you can get your body's ability to adapt to what you're doing, you're going to be better off. And you're going to have less pain. And you're going to be better for your friends and your family, correct?
Absolutely. And I think it all starts with a great foundation, right? Having the building blocks to build off of. And, Dr. Higgins just mentioned, after your career, there are those things that you have to kind of pay for, that you did, the torture that you put yourself through while you were competing. But I was very fortunate. I've never had a surgery. I've never had a broken bone. I had a 17-year weightlifting career, lifting a lot of weights for a lot of days. But it was because I think that I had coaches in the very beginning who cared more about my long-term development than their ability to say, hey, look where I got this kid, now, let me be the head coach for such and such a team. It was really all about me and all about my progress over the years. So when I came to the Olympic Training Center, we probably, during my years there, we probably had gone through over 100 different athletes who could not sustain the level of training that we were undergoing. We were going 6 days a week, twice a day. For years, that's how we trained. A lot of guys could not handle it at all. And I think it was because they didn't have a very good base. I had this tremendous base with great coaches who built me up and prepared me to be ready for that kind of load. So I was able to go through my career pretty much unscathed, other than some overuse type injuries because of the repetitive nature of my sport. But when the career was over, I walked away and, I still feel pretty good. I have to see Dr. Higgins every now and again, but that's more for
who doesn't
trying to keep up with my kids these days.
I like that. Everybody should have an excuse to come see.
Everybody should have a Dr. Higgins in their corner, let me tell you.
Did you notice a time frame when you saw that shift from less preparation in the athletes coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably 20 years old, and I was just kind of like rocking and rolling. There was nothing you could throw at me that could break me down. It was that sort of preparation. So I started lifting when I was 12 years old. That was my first competition, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But from the age of 12, that 8-year building block until I came and started living at the training center, that was my foundation. Where a lot of guys, it was really about how much can I lift as quickly as I can so that I can make this team or I can make that team. A lot of people don't realize I was on 2 Olympic teams. I won a single number 1 national junior championship, and that was in my oldest year. So I got destroyed year after year after year after year because my coaches weren't really thinking about how much you can lift. It was all about a longer plan and kind of building up to that.
They weren't medal focused, they were you focused.
Correct.
Right. And you had Dragomir, right? He's like the Eastern, right?
Yeah, Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe. And they have a really good philosophy too when it comes to training, right? Because they believe in building GPP first, or general physical preparedness first, before they start adding load. So do you think that helped you out quite a bit?
It did in my early years because we did not specialize in the lifts. We did the lifts, snatch and clean and jerk, but we did circuit training, we did dumbbells, we did all sorts of GPP activities that I think over the years, that's what helped me get to the point where now my body was in a position and a state where now you could throw this specific training on me with loads and loads of snatch, clean and jerks, back squats, front squats, and pulls, and I wasn't going to break down because I had that foundation.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I had a little bit of a thought on, like, it's interesting how there is, when we're talking about the athletes and, you know, the fitness of a certain athlete, I feel it's kind of funny how athletes are put on this pedestal of being the fittest in the world when they are the fittest at the world at their specific task. And I think that's really important because a lot of the times we consider, our athletes, because they're admired, we assume that athletes are healthy in that notion. But I always felt like at that level of athletics, you're almost like always flirting with that line,
Right
where,
on that line.
you know, you push a little bit too hard too soon, you're going to end up getting sick or getting hurt. But that's where you have to flirt if you want to find that limitation to that maximum amount of stress that you can tolerate. And then the longer you can tolerate that stress, you know, safely, the higher that adaptation that's going to come. And I wouldn't recommend that level of stress on a daily life for anybody else that isn't trying to particularly push a specific adaptation, you know, within their bodies. And you know, when you mentioned that long period of building that base, it's like this is kind of putting that investment in that enables an athlete to have that longer career, because they don't have to push so hard at the end of their career in order to make those final pushes, or to make that peaking so high, or to be so desperate, because they've already developed those systems, they've already developed that physiology that can enable them to be prepared when competition rolls around, and they just have to manipulate minor stresses so that way they can, you know, super compensate when they need to.
There was a great line that I heard somebody say. It said, if you want to be healthy, don't compete.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you have to flirt with that line so much, right? And you can get very, very broken. And sometimes you have to push through that brokenness. So you're right. Sometimes you put athletes on this pedestal. They might not be the healthiest, though.
No, not at all.
Well, and sometimes it's about experience too, right? Because what is the saying? You don't know what the edge is, and sometimes you have to go off the cliff to understand where the edge is.
Yes.
So in my career, you know, there wasn't times where things never happened, but those were the learning processes where you knew how far you could push, and I was always wanting to kind of push the boundaries, you know, to see, you know, how far do I go before this actually breaks? And then once you find that out, okay, now you can kind of dial it back a little bit, and I think flirt with that line with a little bit more, you know, thought, because you know now how far you can push that envelope, and it changes as your career goes on. But to Morgan's point, which was a good one, as I got older, I realized, and it wasn't until the end of my career I realized I didn't have to do as much to get the same results, or to get the result that I was looking for. And I went through lots of injuries and things because I was still trying to train when I was 28, 29, like I was when I was 20, 21, and it just wasn't working. And finally something dawned on me. One of my teammates, actually, the way that he was training, I'm like, how is it that you are just always, you know, up, you're never injured, this and that? And he's like, well, I basically follow the program. And right, because my thing was more is better. Always more is better. And as I got older, it was not the case, and it wasn't until I had that communication with my teammate and I started to kind of dial it back a little bit. I got healthier, and oh, by the way, my lifts were still going up.
Right, and you're feeling better.
Absolutely.
So that way, when your joints feel good, right, you can lift more.
That's right.
Right.
I feel like that's like an American curse of training because of
all or nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, you know, people that have historically succeeded and championed their sport, and just from the notion that they worked harder than absolutely everyone else, and it's like indoctrinated into the culture that like
hardest work in the room.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's a lot of value to that in learning like the ethic that's involved, that like never say no to more work if that's what you have to do.
Right.
But if what you have to do is take time and recover, then you must prioritize what's going to help you succeed the most. And you know, I'm 32 now. I'm 32 now, and so I have to change the way that I approach my training, and also just being around you guys and all of the professionals. You can't be dumb about training anymore anyways, because there's too much information that just doesn't allow you to be. You can only get lost in the weeds of like, oh, do I do this and do that? But at the end of the day, you know, prioritizing what's most important is about not adding more things in, but taking away things that don't help. And that way your body can really make those advancements in the areas that are the things that are holding you back or preventing you from reaching your potential.
Excellent gold nuggets here, guys. I just hope you guys have your pen and paper out, taking some notes with these great minds talking about fitness. We'll be right back here on the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. Boom. Good. Excellent. That was a good first break.
Yeah,
that was great.
So the next segment is what, 10 minutes, right?
Next segment, yes, 25. Yeah, to 25, and then it can go a little over. Right, I'll raise my hand again. Just finish your thought. It was great. Whatever you have, you know, to finish, and then we'll wrap up that episode. I'm going to get into the difference between exercise and training, because I think that's a great segue from what we just went into. Right, was talking about finding that line, footing that line, and then getting into the difference between exercise and training. Sound good?
Love that.
All right.
It's fun because I preach that too.
We're back on the Cerebral Edge with Power Talk 1040 KPPF with Coach Kris and my star-studded guests right here, my star-studded panel of friends. Right now I kind of want to get into, because we were always talking about how to flirt with the line between training and being healthy and all that. And right now I want to really emphasize to folks out there the difference between exercise and training. So I kind of want to get you guys' thought on that. So we'll start with Dr. Grove Higgins. What's your thoughts on the difference between exercise and training?
Yeah, so in training, there's an end goal, right? Unfortunately, so much of people's fitness, and I use air quotes with that, so much of people's fitness is geared around the exercises that they're doing, right? I love listening to, and I don't remember what the motto is, so Nate, you probably can pull it out for me.
Move, fight, recover.
Move, fight, recover, right? Move, fight, recover. But now how the operator, particularly, there is no workout of the day. There's no exact load, things like that, because their life is variable and they have to just be ready at all times. The exercise doesn't prepare you for that. The training does. It has an endpoint to it, and so then you might fix exercises within that, but it doesn't take you to the goal, and training does. And so a lot of times when I see somebody that's broken, and they're on my table because their back is hurt, they've blown out a shoulder, whatever it might be, it's because they've oftentimes focused on the wrong aspect, and they've developed their fitness in the way that makes them weak, not stronger.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought exercise and fitness, exercise and training, they can be mutually inclusive.
Yeah.
But there is a very important distinction that I like to make, and that exercise is done for its own sake. And so you can go out on a run and enjoy the run. You'll surely benefit from that run. Mm-hmm. But that's not that is the point of the run, is to enjoy the run and benefit from it, versus training. I feel like has, like Dr. Grove said, it has an end goal, but it's a process. Like each session is designed to get you to that specific goal. It's not done for its own sake. It's done for the goal's sake, and it has to be along this line of progress towards that specific goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, developing progress. Yeah, absolutely. Wes?
Well, I think that I have a a sickness then, because I just can't exercise.
Right.
I can't just go out and do things for the pleasure or the sake of doing things. I always have to have a purpose, something that I'm trying. So I will go for months at a time, doing absolutely nothing because I don't have anything that I'm quote unquote training for. So I have to what I like to do is I paint myself in a corner and I'll sign up for a century ride or something like that, where now I know, and I of course give myself a very short period of time to do it. So now I know that every session that I'm on the bike or everything that I'm doing, there's a specific purpose behind it. And that's just something that I've just never been able to, my whole life really just kind of exercise for the sake of doing it. I just always have to have this purpose in mind, this goal, somebody to beat, somebody to compete against. And maybe that's just an illness that I have, but that's just how I'm wired.
Yeah.
I think an easy way for people to think about it is if they think of exercise as more of a health focus. So you can start looking at maybe it's the enjoyment, which is a psychological, mental health focus of it, or it's the actual health benefits of cardiovascular and strength training and all those things. Now the training side, like Doc said, a lot of the law enforcement military, we have this issue with there's too much variability. The reality is that we know a lot of the things that we're going to do, but a lot of the operators and the athletes and whatnot just don't know how to train for that. So what I recommend is an 80% solution is train for and play recreation and team sports. If you can do that, chances are you're going to move the needle in the right direction. So yes, there's all this variability in your job, yes, but if you're playing, say, street hockey like I do, chances are you're probably going to get a lot of the physiological stuff you need, you're going to get the psychological stuff, you're going to get the reactivity, you're going to get a lot of the things you actually need for that position. And as you start getting down that pathway of training for said sport, you're going to start to learn how to actually implement your job skills into that.
Yeah. And that is an important thing. He brought up the aspect of fun. If training's not fun, then we tend to drive down the wrong path a lot of times, right? We emphasize something, overemphasize one aspect too much and develop that too well to the detriment of everything else. Because being an athlete, being a human being, is everything from mobility, flexibility, strength, speed, power, all of those qualities that make an athlete. And if you're not pushing yourself in all of those directions, you become unbalanced, and that's unfortunately where it breaks, and then you're not having fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that they're playing different sports, right? Because that's always emphasized for youth people too, to avoid injuries, because they're using a lot more musculature versus just a specific skill, right? Like you talked about earlier, just using weightlifting as a specific skill. You didn't do that for a long time, right? You did a lot of other things before you went to your exact sport. So when they're operators, right, they're going to be using all this different musculature they don't normally use, which is going to keep them safer, right?
Yeah, it's going to build that resiliency and range of motion and experiencing, mobility that you may not experience otherwise. Gym stuff is going to be very limited, but the sport's going to get you out of that gym mode and kind of get you into a variety of things, especially the team sports with the reactivity and the visual stuff. So I know Doc really focuses on vision, but that sports vision is really critical for these variable type sports where you have to react to stimulus visually. And so I think the team sports tend to help with a lot of that.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I played team sports my whole career, baseball, basketball, football growing up. And I think that that athleticism also contributed to the longevity and the success that one would have in their career because you're so well-rounded. You didn't specialize too early. So that's a really important point that Nate just made.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good, because a lot of people think of it in youth terms, but even me sitting here, I didn't think about it as like an operator level or firefighter level or whatever, to be able to have that diversity of training, which is awesome.
And I really appreciate about that outlook is that there's always a level of unpredictability in team sports and settings like that. And with respect to law enforcement or military, you have to communicate, you have to read the field, you have to be aware of your surroundings all the time. And then with respect to the longevity in sport and exercise and training, it's like you can continue to push the needle as if you're training, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done in a manner, like exercise can be done in a manner that it has an effect like training, but conceptually having the separation is important to understand in terms of how you drive your progress and how and the aim for which something is done specifically. And to your point about the injuries and and how that happens when someone is a little bit off balance, it's off balance with their lifestyle and things along those lines. Well, the unpredictability in these team sports and the variability of all those different sports, they're going to put you in those positions that you're not always exposed to. And usually you get hurt when you're in a position that you're not prepared to be in, and you push yourself a little bit too hard. So if you have so if you're having fun, you're playing a game and you're not going like all out for competition, then you can be exposed to those like micro stresses or just, it's a little bit too harsh, micro stresses, but like you're exposed to different scenarios and stuff and
different stimulus.
The stimuli and those little stimuli, they're going to add up over time, and that's going to really help one move in the right direction towards being more prepared for their work, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. We had a lot of good golden nuggets. Stay tuned next week because I'm going to have the same panel back again here on the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. This is the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. And I'm back with my star-studded panel of guests again today. Dr. Grove Higgins, Morgan Flaherty, Wes Barnett, and Nathan Cragg. Welcome back on, guys.
Howdy.
Thank you.
Hello.
All right. So the first question we got today is, what got you guys into your perspective, sport and or profession? We'll start with Dr. Grove Higgins over here.
I guess you could call it a little bit of a sport. By the time in my day, like on today, when we're recording this, I've worked out. So anyway, no, what got me into this? I was always an athlete growing up. I did all sorts of team sports like everybody else here, and did some bodybuilding and things like that. But through that, I had my little injuries and such. But it wasn't until somebody that was near to me was injured and I got a chance to be in the healthcare system helping that person through it that I thought that this would even be an area. But what got me into the performance aspect is I got a chance to work with some of the best docs and mentors that got to work with the likes of Wes sitting here. I got to work with him as he was in his career, and I was just beginning mine. That seems like a long time ago, Wes.
Yes, it makes me feel
and
old.
yeah, me too. And I saw how to take somebody and keep them at that 1% or try to get more than that 1% out to keep them at the top of their game. It made it possible for me to help other people who were not aiming at the 1%, that are just the weekend warriors and the moms and things like that, stay at their absolute best by helping these guys and gals stay at their absolute best.
Morgan?
I guess it's kind of like a two-part cyclical story. I was mostly obsessed with track and field.
Love it.
And I wanted to be the fastest person ever, and there would always be school races all the time at our little elementary school. And like I made it a point to always be the fastest one, and there was one person that was always faster than me. And they were like, I was like in first grade. It would be like a fifth grader, and second grade, fifth grader, third grade, fifth grader. And I was always like coming in second on these. So I wanted to be the fastest person alive. And at that time I was inspired by Michael Johnson when he just crushed it in 1996. And so I saw that and I was like, all right, I'm going to be a track star.
Plus you look like an Adonis.
I mean,
freaking ripped.
I just like how fast he was,
He was fast, yeah.
It was awesome. And so I was like in it for track and field, like running at this little dirt track behind my house. Whenever I had the opportunity, there was a bum there. I gave him a stopwatch, and he would like. I remember breaking. I mean, I'm like 11 years old,
Did you
trying
call him
to.
Mickey?
His name was Rusty.
Nice, Rusty.
And I remember trying to break the 13-second barrier for the 100-meter dash. And I mean, I was like 11, 12 years old, so it was.
I was about to say 11 seconds. I was like, whoa!
I mean, I was getting there by the end of my 8th grade.
Nice.
By the end of 8th grade, but I got fast forward. High school comes around. Needed to be disciplined a lot. I got kicked out of the track meet when I was in a 8th grader, and I had set the record, this record in California for the 100 and long jump in my respective ages, 6th grade, 7th grade, and then coming up 8th grade, I got kicked out for skateboarding on the school. I tried to jump off the roof, and I got caught. So disciplined, and then that just took me down a bad path. And high school principal, fast forward a lot, bad stuff happens. He disciplined me in high school by putting me in wrestling. And I hated it. I hated wrestling. I was just getting beat up, and it was suffering, and I was looking forward to track season, and had a great track season my freshman year, but I qualified for nationals in wrestling. So my coach made me run a marathon to fundraise to go to nationals. And when I got back from this marathon, I untrained, right? I just showed up, ran this marathon.
Just show up.
And I was sore for like 2 weeks after this marathon. It was called the Forest and Icene Marks. It was 14 and a half miles up a mountain. And 14 and a half miles or 13 down the mountain. And I was just trashed. And when I went back to the track, I could not jump the same. I could not run the same. And I was like, well, my only chance of going to the Olympics is through wrestling now. So here we go. And that's how I got into, that's how I committed to wrestling.
Story. I love that one. You've never done it before. Let's go run a marathon up a mountain.
I didn't, well, my coach didn't know. He just signed up for the closest marathon to the day. It was a month away. And so I just called the cross country coach, like, what do I do? He's just like, add 1 mile every day and then start over on the next Monday until you get up to 26 or whatever. And I got up to like 18, and then the next weekend was the marathon, and I just sent it.
Nice. Wes.
Well, I was going to say, well, at least your track and field story. So when I was in elementary school, and then I'll get to how I got into weightlifting in a second. But I was the fastest kid in the school. I was a 6th grader. My sister was a 4th grader. She was fast. So the whole school comes out on field day to watch this race. And I was very fast off the start. I could feel her gaining on me, and I could tell that she was going to eclipse me by the finish line. So I faked a hamstring injury and was able to get out. I still got called out on it, but I limped around for a while to try and really sell that for sure. But no, my story of how I got into weightlifting, it was just all of dumb luck, really. I went to a youth center, which was a couple blocks from my house, and that's where I spent most of my time. And you'd go there, you'd shoot pool, you'd play foosball, they had a gym, we played basketball, and one day the youth director, who was also the weightlifting coach, comes in and says, I'm having a weightlifting meet today. You have 2 choices. You can lift or you have to go home. Okay? So I was taught how to do snatch and clean and jerk an hour before the contest started. Competed. I think I snatched like 25 kilos, clean and jerk 35 kilos, which was good enough for 4th place. And people were like, oh, your first competition, that's not bad. But there were only 4 people in my weight class, so dead last. And he said after the competition was over that he was going to train some kids over the fall. And then next spring we'll have another meet, and then whoever qualified would go to the Junior Olympics. And that year was in 1984. They were in Jacksonville, Florida. So I was like, wow, here I am, small town St. Joseph, Missouri. Never thought I would leave anywhere. Right. So now this carrot out there of Jacksonville, Florida. So long story short, trained, qualified, went down, took a station wagon. Some of you don't even know what a station wagon is, I know, but we took a station wagon, it's a long vehicle, take a minivan and smash it down and stretch it out. That was what we drove down. So we drove down in a station wagon, and I won, everything that could be won, and I said, this is the sport for me, and then stuck with it the next 17 years.
Nice.
Wow.
So my story started a little bit later. Also in elementary school, I was fast, but that didn't really lead me to sport or anything with that. So towards the end of high school, pretty athletic, again, played all the team sports, all that good stuff, fast, but I was very underweight. So I wanted to put on some weight before I joined the military. I was actually 6 foot and 135 pounds.
Oh my God.
So I was very light. So I needed to put on some weight, so I did that, and just with
I eat sandwiches bigger than that, by the
Yeah.
way. But yeah.
So when I get into a subject, I tend to do the deep dive, which is how I became a warrant officer. Is you do a deep dive in something for a couple months and then maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the deep dive, cool, do my first couple of years in the military. And then towards the end, I went to go test out for Austin Fire Department. They had the CPAT, which is the Candidate Physical Agility Test or Physical Ability Test. Mm-hmm. Trained for it, there's like very early in the internet, like there's actually some websites and stuff. So I found a website that actually had a firefighter program. I did it and I added in putting on my duffel bag and run the stairs to simulate the stairs. So I get to the CPAT, and just to jump ahead, I did pass it, but I felt awful. Mm-hmm. I was like, that was not what it should have been. And in high school, I had done a bunch of firefighters tasks, so I knew how to do the skills, and that kind of got me through it. But I just did not feel good. And so that drove into more of the training side of it, like how do you actually get better at performance? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what got me into it.
What did you find got you better at performance of doing that job? What carried over the best?
I think for me it's a combination of repetitive skill of the actual skill sets. Mm-hmm. So again, just like sport, you want to actually do the sport. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of that, and for me, just a baseline foundation of strength and conditioning. So for me, it's weird because everybody thinks lightweight guy, I should have better endurance, which I do in certain aspects, but not like aerobic endurance is not as good with me. I'm more of a sprinter. Mm-hmm. So I tend to have issues with some of those muscular endurance things that you would think I would be perfectly fine at, and it's just not. So it kind of sucks for a while. So I had to focus a lot on that. So got into dove deep into like Joel Jamieson's conditioning type stuff, and I've obviously expanded since then with triphasic and other things. But so I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole and took the sport application and started to delve that into more the career standpoint, because the previous stuff with the firefighter law enforcement was basically just bodybuilding. It was like, it's cool, but it didn't transfer.
Yeah, made you look real good though, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's what I always thought that they were doing in the firehouses, was just getting jacked all day long.
Yeah.
And cooking chili.
Chili cook-offs, right?
No, there is a component when it comes to law enforcement side of officer presence where it does help to have a physique that is intimidating. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you want that and sometimes you won't, just depending on the scenario. But that does have a positive aspect in some form. So a lot of my law enforcement guys, I'm like, hey man, if you want to hit a arm program just to increase the size of your arms because it looks better in the sleeves, like that's not a bad thing. I know a lot of coaches are like, oh, that's not functional. But when it comes to officer presence, it is functional because now you've de-escalated some scenarios.
Yeah, could you imagine getting pulled over by Ronnie Coleman?
I was just thinking
Back in the day.
I just wear smaller shirts.
I didn't get a smaller shirt. My muscles are just so big that the shirts just don't fit.
he wears a belt around his bicep.
Exactly. So in your prospective careers, right, I know you guys have probably suffered some pretty good injuries. I want to know the worst injuries that you guys have went through and how you overcame them.
Ooh,
Go with Morgan.
I'll start with. I mean, I feel like injuries is like part of wrestling in the sense that you kind of are trying to injure somebody to a certain level, and
right.
So you have to.
It is a combative art.
You know,
that is the point of it.
I mean, a gut wrench, you do it right if you break somebody's rib, and if you get it on the right spot, you will. Mm-hmm. And so the most painful injury, I think, are rib injuries. And actually, the worst injury that I ever had actually happened. There were two injuries that happened at once. And I was in a match, and I had someone in what's called a pinch headlock. It's where you got their arm up and their neck, and I'm squeezing here, and I had lost this opponent before. So I was like, all right, this is not just about winning. Now it's about a little bit of mercy. And I just squeezed so hard that I broke my own sternum.
Oh!
And I was like, and I heard it pop, and I was like, oh shoot, I just broke my sternum. And then at that time, I was like taking a step away, my feet got tangled,
Oh
and then he
my God.
threw me, and so my feet were tangled, and then I tore my MCL. So I remember getting off that match being like, oh, and like limping on one side. And this was at the Olympic Training Center at the Dave Schultz Memorial Tournament. So I remember having the worst walk of shame to the sports med center, and they're like, what happened? And I was like, I broke my sternum and my knee's broken too. And they were like, where do we start? And I'm like, I need to breathe.
I
And
gotta breathe, please.
that was pretty bad.
And you're like, and I did it myself.
Yeah, self-induced injuries.
Wes.
Yeah, I've never really had any serious injuries. Probably the worst one I ever had.
It's because Wes is a Terminator. If you look at
Yeah,
him,
it might
I don't
be.
think he's aged since '96.
Thank you for that. But no, I mean, I had mentioned on the last podcast, never a broken bone, never a surgery. But probably the worst thing that had happened to me, for those that don't know, if you're doing higher reps in the snatch, you'll wear straps. So I had straps on, and I was snatching for doubles or triples, something like that. And I had 160 kilos on the bar and was going for, my first snatch, and the bar started drifting behind me. So rather than let it go like I should have, I like contort my body in such a way where I shift way back on my heels to try and shift the balance so that the bar will now come back forward and then level out overhead where it's supposed to be, and then I could stand up and be done. But I was down in the bottom of the squat, and I couldn't go backwards and I couldn't go forward, and the bar was coming straight down on me, and there was nothing that I could do about it. So at the last possible second, once it started coming down, I kind of shot out of the back, but because I had the straps on, it came across both of my shins. So that's, for everybody that doesn't know kilos, that's 352 pounds that came across both of my shins. Fortunately, my feet were off the ground, so it wasn't like that, but it still hit and just ricocheted down, and that was not good. I couldn't walk for about half a day with that. So that's the worst that I've had happen.
All right, we gotta take a moment. We gotta take a moment here and pay some bills. This is the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. Good.
That's where like the most painful thing is like when you accidentally step on a skateboard and it hits you in the shins.
Yes.
Like, you'll be on the ground for like some half hour.
So here are still the scar. This is where it took the big gash out, but it just like hit here, and hit here.
Oh my god!
And then over
is
here.
It all from
somewhere.
one?
Yeah, all from one
shot. It was just
mine's like hundreds.
Straight. Oh yeah.
I just think of straight up just like smashing my shin on a bar, and then thinking about that is just unconceivable.
It hurt.
I just can't imagine, Jackie Berube.
Oh my god!
And how she, oh my gosh.
Was she the one who broke her forearms?
No. She the bar came down and smacked her on the thighs. It literally split her quads.
Oh.
Split her quads right there, and she walked around, and the sports med people just said, "Oh, it's just a contusion," and they didn't diagnose it till she got back, and she won her class still that day.
Wow,
that's insane. How does that stuff even happen?
It's unbelievable.
Looks like you don't need quads in weightlifting.
Yeah, apparently not.
Well, they teach you. The bar goes one way, you go the other way.
Right. And
don't just stay static and let the thing hit you.
Yeah. So we'll come back and hit yours, and then
you could have easily snapped a bone.
Yeah, if my foot had been on the ground and it hit, it would have been game over. But fortunately, I was like this, and it just goes.
Dang.
And then we are back with the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. Got the guys here talking about their injuries, and we're up with Nathan Cragg on his. But so far, I think Wes, I'm not sure, it's a tie between Wes and Morgan breaking his own sternum. But we're up with Nathan Cragg here with his.
So similar, I do not have any, have not had any surgeries, have not broken bones other than toes. I did split my skull a couple times when I was a kid because that's what you do as a kid.
Yeah.
So for me, it's mostly been strains. So pure formless was probably the worst one in 2008. I was on deployment, pulled that one, and to this day, doc still has to readjust my hips.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely been an issue. Nothing super traumatic. It was just a bad lift, and it was done.
Mm-hmm. What were you doing?
I think bent over rows or something.
Ah.
Like something simple that should have not have been an issue. Yeah. So I tried for 3 years to fix it, and of course Doc fixes it in like 15 seconds. I was like, oh okay.
Oh, yeah, that was it. Okay.
So after that, I would say the next was I've kind of had repetitive knee issues that got to the point where I couldn't sit. So I'm one of those people that I adapt to things very quickly, whether it's good or bad. So I went from being very active in the gym to sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day and driving. And it got so bad that like I could not sit more than 15 minutes driving without being an 8 out of 10 on pain scale. Turns out a couple years later, as I'm playing street hockey and I strained my MCL, they did the MRI. Turns out I had a torn ACL. They don't know when. So at some point I did tear the ACL. Not sure when.
That's funny, isn't it?
Yeah. The body's got an amazing capacity for compensating for stuff and make it seem like everything's normal.
It could have been years, could have been months. I don't know.
Yeah, that's where you always go to. Pain doesn't always necessarily equal injury, and injury doesn't always necessarily equal pain, right?
Yep.
So I want to get back to Morgan. How did you recover from that? Like, what did you do? What was your mindset after that?
I've always believed for injuries of all sorts that the quicker you get back, the quicker you get back. Mm-hmm. So the next day, I remember there's a trail out here, the Mesa Trail. I just wrapped my knee as tight as I possibly could. And I did that hike up and down. Because I did that, it was probably not so good for the healing process. Doc looking like disdain. But what it did help me do is I did not have any trouble walking.
Nice.
So although I was in a lot of pain, I was still able to walk normally, without like guarding. So that was nice because I whenever I hurt something, I usually try to walk it off or try to work through it like as quickly as I can. Even no matter what the pain is, I won't like try to push it or nothing like that or try to anything like that. But and then the sternum, oh
man, I can imagine that.
Ribs and sternums, like it still bothers me in some ways. Like I remember last week or a couple weeks ago, my shoulder was bothering me, and they go to like check it out. They're like, "Oh, you've got like 3 ribs out right now." I was like, "Where?" They're like, "Oh, like 1, 2, and 3 on the top." So just this whole area is just kind of like different.
Yeah.
Now it's just different, for better or for worse. I mean, it's adapted to sport. I can tolerate more pain and more manipulation from other people, but my body is just kind of like a floating piece of jello with bones inside. Yeah. And it was just so painful. Sleeping stinks. Breathing stinks. I mean, you have to relearn how to breathe when you hurt your ribs, and that's like the worst part. It's like it's almost psychosomatic at some point.
I was gonna say it was like the first time getting back on the mat with that.
I mean,
scary.
It's super scary, but I actually think in some ways it helps your defense.
Yeah.
It helps it as much as it hurts it, because it helps it because it becomes life and death. It becomes life and death. Like, you know how much pain you're going to be in if you mess it up, but it's also like you have to relax to be really good at sensing technique and sensing positions, and so you want to like panic and like fight for your life, but at the same time you have to be as relaxed as you possibly can. So that paradox is like really hard to like find that balance.
Have you ever used that headlock again?
I have actually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have used that headlock again, but now I focus on the technique instead of the barbaric approach.
Just squeezing until your stone snaps.
Yeah. What's kind of interesting to extend off that is when you look at, say a law enforcement officer or military, once, say you get in your first actual like hand-to-hand fight, or in the military side, you get in your first gunfight, the best thing you can do is get back out there and do it. So from a sports psychology recovery standpoint, I think that's a huge aspect too, is being able to get back into it. I'm sure it's the same with getting back on the mat as quickly as possible as you can safely, just to get your head back in the game.
Yeah, a lot of pain is fear. It's the body's response to perceived injury, and like you already said, pain doesn't always equal injury, but also injury doesn't always cause pain.
Yeah.
Sometimes too. So you have to get that good sense of your body and start to listen to all the signs and the signals and whatnot. But the virtue in what Morgan did was, by continuing to move, he was able to convince his mind, his brain, that the joint was still there, that it was intact, even though it was wrapped up and things like that. And he kept the movement going. So then as the healing did come along, he didn't have to relearn and get rid of the fear that he otherwise would have set in his system if he hadn't have done that.
Mm-hmm. That's what happened to a lot of people that come if they have a strain in their ankle. Is the first thing I'll take them through is ankle tilts to the point of no pain, right? Because that's constantly settling that signals your brain that this is okay. Because your brain's always asking, how safe is this really? And the more you take them into that, where there's no pain, they goes, oh, I can move it further. And it gives it more adrenaline out, because that's what you're doing. You're actually programming that system. Yeah. Any other closing thoughts?
I always remember whenever I would like bump my elbow or something like that, you know how you kind of like rub on it and almost like to make it hurt, but also like you kind of push the pain to the point where it starts to like feel okay, and then you kind of accept it and move on. It kind of makes me think about that sort of notion of like, you know, being okay with the pain to the point where you no longer are afraid of it.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of move on.
Yeah. That's a natural thing too. When you bump something, the natural reaction is to rub, right? To get some sensation in their area, so that way you're like, okay.
Unfortunately, that's what Dragmer did to my shins after.
I was going to ask about that.
No, please don't touch me. But no, I think in
come in with your shins.
in sport, I think sometimes tend to normalize that, you know, that, all right, this is just part of the gig, you know, I've got to feel bad, this has to hurt. If you walked into the weight room and nothing hurt, you know, it was like, whoa, something is off here. So really understanding that, you know, that isn't normal. There is a different normal that you can have that, you know, that doesn't embody, you know, being in pain all the time. But that's something that I think you kind of learn over time. But athletes and individuals really need to understand that this doesn't have to be your normal.
Mm-hmm. That's why I like working with athletes, right? Because they want to get better yesterday. So whenever they come into like a rehab setting or coming in for some sort of injury, like they will do everything that you give them, probably 3 or 4 more times than what they're supposed to do it. But that's the different mindset between an elite level athlete and the average person, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today. This has been the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. Join us next. This is the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. Welcome to the show. We're back again with a panel of guests. We've got Nathan Cragg, Wes Barnett, Morgan Flaherty. Flaherty, right?
Yes.
I was like, did I say that wrong?
I've actually been corrected by many people, including the boxing coach at the Olympic Training Center, Coach Billy. He's from Ireland. He's like, oh, it's Flaherty.
That's Flaherty.
So I don't know. I actually don't really know anymore what my last name is.
Very nice. And Dr. Grove Higgins, and with me as always, Coach Kris, right? And I have that weird last name too, Gieske. I've got Gieske, right? All kinds of different ways that I guess I'm supposed to pronounce my name too. So I totally get it. So anyway, the first question we're going to kick off to you guys right now is, what is the best piece of coaching advice have you ever received or even given? Nathan.
So mine's going to be a little bit different. This is more of a leadership thing. So in 2017, I was in a small base in Iraq, and I was actually one of only a few Army guys, and everybody else was Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And the colonel that was in charge of that task force is hands down the best senior leader I've ever worked under. And I wouldn't even say it's a piece of advice, but it was how he built and structured the culture. of that base because it was small, because it was just us. I mean, we're out there by ourselves. This is post, global war on terror when, Iraq had hundreds of thousands of people. Now it's just like there's a couple of us and like the country. I mean, that's like we're on our own. We had some of our outer perimeter security was not exactly safe. If you could say it that way. It's kind of like Afghanistan was with the Taliban. Yeah. So very similar. But for me, what I took away the most was how we structured the culture. There was this whole structure of, Camp Mannion X, and we had these, workouts, earn a t-shirt, and you had every time somebody new came on the base, he would personally come down there, introduce himself, tell them his story.
Oh, that's awesome.
And talk to them individually like a person, which you don't see with senior leaders very often.
Not very often at all.
When you get visitors, you'd say, hey, let me know if you're going to have a visitor. And he would personally walk them in the office, say, hey, here's our base, and then again, the whole rundown, regardless of what their rank was. So it was just that culture that he built was just what I took away from it. There was a thing called Turley's Orphans, which was, I don't even know where the history came from, but that was just kind of like us because we're out there on our own. We're almost like orphans all by ourselves, but because we were together, we were a family.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter what branch you were in. You could be Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. Didn't matter. Everybody worked together as a family. So that's kind of what I took away was that culture that he built.
That's great.
Yeah. From my perspective, the rapport is probably the most important thing that a coach can build between himself and his athlete or his team and things like that. If you don't have that, you can have the best advice in the world and whatnot, and you just won't get the engagement that you will. And especially this throws the whole gender thing in there. Working with female teams, as a male, you can get a lot of friction built up by not respecting that aspect and building those relationships. And then you can get them working against you. Whereas, a bunch of guys, I can go, kick them in the rear and call them names and insult them, and they'll work harder for me.
Yeah.
You got to know your audience, and you got to know who you're working with, and such like that. And rapport is where it's all at.
Mm-hmm. Wes.
Cool. Yeah. So, in weightlifting in the era that I lifted, it was pretty much the upper weight classes where I was at was dominated by the Russians. Then, of course, maybe the worst thing that happened was when the Soviet Union broke up, and now instead of one Soviet Union team, you had 15 different Russian republics, and at the time it was more difficult to make the Soviet team than it was to actually win the Olympic gold medal. So in some of those classes, so if you made the team, you're almost a shoo-in because they were that good.
Wow.
So there was always this kind of expectations. The United States, we were the powerhouse in the 50s and in the 60s, but then after that, we were just kind of not. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but so everyone had this kind of expectation where, you're going to finish or who's going to win or how you're going to do. And the one thing that Dragomir said to me that, that has stuck with me, not only through my lifting career, but also I use this in my everyday life. His bit of advice was, hold yourself to a higher standard than anyone else expects of you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of that, in no matter what scenario you are in, life, work, marriage, family, sport, whatever, I think if you can subscribe to that and live by that, you're going to be far better off than not. So I always tried to do that every competition I went into. Hey, let me show the world who I am. I'm not going to be relegated to, down here, at the bottom. So I would work and train along that philosophy to kind of get to the point where I was contending with the big boys, let's call them, the top of the heap there. And, eventually that worked out well for me. And, where I won our first world championship medals for a male weightlifting athlete in like 3 decades. But again, it's something that I take with me and have used in my whole life after that. So hold yourself to a higher standard than anyone else expects of you.
It's 3 decades.
3 decades we hadn't won a medal at a world championship.
Wow.
And I did it in 1997.
That's pretty amazing. So that kind of goes back to that saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
That's right.
Right? So holding yourself to that higher standard, it doesn't matter what it is you're doing, right? Doing chores or whatever, right? Making sure it's done to the best of your ability. Going to the gym, right? Make sure you follow that program to a T. Every set, every rep, whether you want to or not. That's...
You're exactly right. And now trying to instill that in my kids, you know, you just talked about chores and house cleaning and keeping your room clean. Yeah, it's still a struggle, but I'm trying to instill that in the kids as well.
Feel like you'll be an All-American.
One day.
One day. If
Just
you...
make your bed every day, right?
Morgan.
I'm gonna try not to take too long, because there's been an unbelievable number of people that have supported me along my path of trying to make an Olympic team and try to break the national team and earn a medal. And like everybody has given me such great advice along the way that I've really kept to heart. So I guess I have a couple little nuggets that I can share, and then I'll give like the granddaddy of them all at the very end.
I love it, the granddaddy.
The first one has got to be my high school wrestling coach. He didn't like tell this to me, but he taught it to me, and that was find your breaking point. So after I got pretty good my sophomore year in high school, to the point where I wasn't getting challenged too much in the wrestling room. So he took it upon himself to wrestle with me after practice until I quit. And so I would just try my absolute hardest until I could get a takedown on him. And it took me about 3 months of wrestling for about an hour to an hour and a half after wrestling practice to finally get a takedown. And like, there were more days of crying than there were days of happiness. And it'd be funny because you know, I would beat everybody up in practice, and then he would show me what's up. And then like, you know, once I took him down, everything started shifting. So then he started sending me to other places to find new partners, because he's like, you've moved on, you know, young Padawan. And
that reminds me of the scene of Good Iron Gang where he's like, where The Rock dresses up in the pads, he says, knock me in my butt.
Yeah, it was that one for me was like an important lesson, was to find your breaking point. And you know, because I would go as hard as I could until I could not do anymore, and like my body just gave up on me on those times. And so the next like quintessential shift that happened for me was when I got invited to move to Colorado Springs to train with the national team here. I was playing rugby at UC Davis. I was wrestling at the university, but they had their team cut. So I only had 2 years of Division I wrestling, only 1 year of partial varsity. I was like wrestling off constantly for the spot, and the other guy was up getting the best of me most of the time, all of the time. And so when I finally got invited to the Colorado Springs, it was because I was writing letters to places to go to try to keep wrestling, because I wanted to finish my career. And one of the coaches here called me, and he says, hey, his name was Momir Petkovic, and he says, hey, I hear you want to wrestle here in Colorado Springs with the Olympic team. You know, what makes why do you want to come out here? I was like, I've resolved to make an Olympic team and earn a medal, and that's what I've been wanting to do my whole life. And he's like, okay. And at this point, I had never All-American, didn't even place a state in high school, or we did win nationals in rugby, but that's rugby. It's not Greco-Roman Olympic wrestling.
Right.
And he said, after I said, like, you know, I want to earn this and now that and earn that, and he's like, that doesn't matter. I was like, what do you mean? He says, it doesn't matter how many medals you have around your neck. It matters how you breathe and how you walk, which ultimately will determine whether or not you can become a champion. And I will know when you walk through these doors whether or not you have what it takes to become a champion. And I'm like floored. And I'm sitting there like, okay, what do I do now? And he's like, well, if you can come out here and wrestle with us there's an opportunity for you to live with somebody for a month, and you can try out. And if you like it, and we like you, you can stay. And so Coach Muhammad took me in. I lived at his place for a month. My professors at school were all cool with it. So I lived in Colorado Springs for a month, and then I became a mop on the mat. And Momir liked what he saw.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I scored a single point, but like he liked what he saw, and then he invited me to come back. So when I graduated college, I moved to Colorado Springs, and that was how that began.
Yeah.
And off of his like little quote that gave me hope and belief in myself that, you know, it doesn't matter how good I had been, because I was like, I don't think I belong here. As much as I wanted, I don't think I belong at the Olympic Training Center. He's like, no, that's not what matters. And so that gave me hope in fulfilling that journey.
I think a huge piece too was having your coach come in, right, and telling you to take him down, and you getting wiped all those times. So then you're going into the OTC, right? You're probably like, this is old hat, right?
Yeah. I can handle at least 3 months in a row before I get a takedown, which is kind of what happened in college too. But the most important piece of coaching advice, I gotta say, came from my dad, and it wasn't even coaching. He kind of said it offshoot, and he would say it all these like random little quotes all the time. He just lived by these maxims. He just wanted to be as concise as possible.
Is this the granddaddy one?
Yes.
Awesome.
And my dad said, relax into what must be endured. And that has like always come in handy. Like just no matter how bad things can be, you never know how bad things can be. But if you can relax into it and find peace in those moments, then you'll be fine no matter what happens.
Yeah. That's one thing I always said, especially when things got really rough, either in training or through combat or through basic training, is the one thing that I always say in my mind is this isn't going to last forever. That's one thing that I always kept up here, right? So whether the, instructor was like, hey, you got to do 50 more push-ups, I'm just like, it won't last forever, right? And I just kind of pushed through that. But the other thing that I really like, the parallel between you two, is that you guys didn't just go through and come out as just studs from the get-go, right? It took a while to build that up, which I found fascinating, the parallels between that, which is awesome.
I'm still working at it.
Well, you have to lose in order to learn how to win, and similar stories. I mean, older brother, beat me in everything all the time. My weightlifting coach, he was a great basketball player, and I played high school basketball, and it was the same sort of thing with your coach. And 15-0, 15-0, 15-0, 15-1, then 15-4. Then when I could beat him, I'd go to high school, and those kids didn't stand a chance. So you're exactly right. You've got to take the lick. A lot of people aren't willing to take the licks. They want that instant gratification, the instant success, and you've got to take your lumps, and just there are so many that aren't willing to do it and stick it out. But that makes the winning part that much sweeter.
Right. Awesome information today, guys, on the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. We are back with Power Talk 1040 KPPF. This is the Cerebral Edge with Coach Kris, and I'm back with Wes Barnett, Nathan Cragg, Morgan Flaherty, and Doc Grove Higgins. And this is my next question for this wonderful panel, is what other areas of your life improved or did you have to take away to be all in your sport?
I guess I'll start.
All right.
And I'll start with some of the subtractions from living a, I guess you could say a servitude type of life, whether that's military or when I was working hospital security, things like that, any kind of public safety. You definitely lose a lot of your free time. You do lose some health. You have definitely sleep disruptions, and you have all these health things, and you get exposed to chemicals and electromagnetic radiation and things like that. So there's a lot of health side effects that kind of come through, especially after decades of that. But on the positive side, you just get so much when it comes to your leadership skill and your ability to learn and and expand and like see the world differently. You go different places, you see different people, you interact with different cultures, and I think you just see that bigger picture towards the end, and you can start putting pieces together from, you know, this piece over here connects to this piece over here, and you kind of have this big little mind map that kind of collects a lot of things together. And now you start to process and think in different ways than probably other people that you're around. So that's some big takeaways that I've taken.
That's great.
Well, some of the losses, I think you perceive them as being losses while you're on this journey, and it's not until you get to the end that you look back and realize that they weren't really losses at all.
Right.
But a lot of it goes back to, you know, for me, high school. You know, there was never a spring break that I went to. There was, you know, the partying and all that. You know, it was just never part, and you feel like you're missing out on things because where are you at? Well, you're in the weight room, you're in the gym, you are, you know, kind of doing things that that others aren't doing, and you know, you're perceiving them as having all this fun, and here you are kind of stuck in the grind. But it's not until you get to, you know, ultimately where you end up that you look back and you say, boy, I really didn't miss anything at all, because when you look at where you ended up, you know, made a couple Olympic teams, and I've worked for the Olympic Committee, traveled all around the world, and you get to meet and know, you know, so many great, amazing people and have all of these amazing experiences, and you look back at kind of the same folks that you thought were having such a great time, and they're just kind of stuck and kind of still in that space, never having experienced that, working out, you know, a 9-to-5 blue collar job, and you know, so when you look at it, yeah, while you're in that moment, it feels like a loss, but at the end of the day, you wouldn't trade it for the world. You're very fortunate to be where you are, and that's really what goes into, you know, making you the person that you are. Without those experiences, I would have never been the person that I am today, and never be in the position that I am. So
yeah, you find out a lot about yourself when you take yourself to that edge, to that limit, right? And that's where a lot of growth comes from. And like you said earlier, not a lot of people are willing to do that. And we had a conversation before we started. Was you're like, man, I was in Missouri, and you're like, it was Saturday, people were sleeping, and I had to get up and go to the gym.
6 a.m., cold, dark, by yourself, and you just sit there, you know, your body's aching, and you're like, what am I doing? But then when you're standing up on the medal dais at the World Championships, okay, I guess this is what I was doing it for. So it all pays off.
I love it. Morgan.
Shoot, I'm gonna try. I want to kind of approach this backwards.
Go ahead.
And that is like, I still feel like I have the opportunity to miss out, and that's because, you know, I'm still in the grind.
You're in it.
I'm still in it, and I feel like every day I have the opportunity to miss something and to lose something. So it's like every day is an which isn't, this is probably like my weakness in my mentality, the chink in my armor.
That's great. People need to hear that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, my weakness is that every day matters so much that, that I'm almost longing for the results before they happen, right? Whether it's not making the team, like how am I going to have resolve for not making the Olympic team after putting my whole life to it? And so I feel like that is like, I still have that to lose. And so that is one of the things that I feel at this stage of the life of my career, where I like want to make, you know, the next Olympic team and then the one after that, because in LA, I mean, I'll be 36, which is when people I'm 32 already. People are saying like, oh, how long are you going to wrestle for? And I'm like, I'm going to wrestle until you have to drag me off the mat.
Until the wheels fall off.
Until the wheels fall off, until I have my resolve. And, you know, as long as I'm ready, willing, and able, and healthy, I'm going to keep after it. And I think there's like standing at the podium at LA, you know, hometown California, all friends, family, all the people that have been there from the beginning have the opportunity to see that. I feel like I have that to lose. And so, and I have the opportunity to bring that to all these people. And not only that, but like fulfill some of the things that I really believe in about the way the world works and the way the universe works. And like, it's kind of like I said, bringing me that resolve, as opposed to like, what did I miss out on life? I mean, I get asked to coach places and I have to decline because I'm like, I really need to finish this chapter of my life. And and on the flip side, like I mentioned, I feel like all of the sacrifices that I'm making in order to do this for my sport, to me, it's a sense of pride. Like I like that I am willing to let go of all these things so that way I can focus on something. It's just fulfilling, and I want to find more truth in myself, but also in the world that we live in through this endeavor of like pushing as far as I can in sport.
But also there, you know, being an athlete, an elite athlete, there is a bit of selfishness that comes with that, because your life as an athlete, the window that you have is so short. And the one thing that you never ever want is the what ifs. So if you don't put all your chips in and go for it, you'll be asking yourself, what if, and that is the worst feeling in the world. So if you can do it, great. A lot of people can't, but if you can, do it, because at the end of this, you don't want any regrets.
But I love the way Morgan also said, I still feel like I'm missing out sometimes, right? Because that makes you human, right? And people will sit there and be like, oh, well, they're just an athlete, they just love to do it, so they do it, right? That's nothing can be further from the truth sometimes.
Well, what you have to think about too is those that are around you. Like, you know, my wife, you know, we had a small child, and the amount of time that I was home compared to away in the gym on the road, you kind of miss those years. So that's another thing. And you know, you try to make up for it, you know, kind of later in life, the best that you can. But again, if you want this, there's this level of selfishness that you have to have that a lot of people don't understand.
They don't understand at all,
But you want to leave this when it's time to hang them up, to look back and say, I gave it my all, and I don't regret anything.
And there's a peace in that, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I think people don't realize that there's such a strong connection between high-level athletes, high-level performers, whether it's public safety. You look at like astronauts, like we all have a very similar mentality, a very similar mindset. It all just kind of connects. Like you can see we have almost similar stories with a completely different life track.
Absolutely. That's one thing that, you know, we hear in the Army all the time, right? Is you don't rise to level situation, you fall level of your training. Right. So I think that's awesome. I'm so glad I had you guys on. It's been awesome. Thank you for coming on. This has been the Cerebral Edge on Power Talk 1040 KPPF. Join us every Saturday as we try to make you 1% better and give you the best, and get you the best version of yourself.
Take two.
Take two.